connection. She guides us through the connection between therapy, the life of an artist, and the natural world as a place of healing. Miss Lowell is an avid birder. She jumped at the chance to accompany Mass Audubon on their weekly Osprey nest monitoring project on the Westport River. She hoped to get some photos of cute Osprey chicks that she could use in her paintings. But what happened next was nothing short of a transformation. In a journal format, Miss Lowell weaves together a deeply personal and exciting narrative as a passenger on the Lucky Me, along with a cast of dedicated staff and volunteers. Nature enthusiasts will enjoy descriptions of the most monitoring process, banding, and translocation of osprey chicks. Uh, Miss Lowell perfectly captured our dilemma of being poised between desperate worry and the urgent need to do something specific to help our planet. With her original illustrations throughout, this book that she's written and going to talk to us tonight about inspires us all to be better stewards and healers of our ever-changing world. So without further ado, let me introduce Miss Pamela Lowell. Miss Lowell, you have the floor, please.
Alrighty. Should I can't see myself, so I'm just going to share my screen because it's
You
my
look real nice. You look
no,
real nice.
thank you, Dean, for that. Thank you for the intro. I have been introduced by people with India accents when I was traveling to India this winter, and people with New Mexican accents in Connecticut, but never before have I been introduced by someone with a Southern accent. So that was a pleasure. Thank you for the nice intro. And I'm thrilled to be here with over 50 right now people who are listening in on this Zoom. So thank you all for taking time out of your evening to share a little journey down the Westport River in Massachusetts with me. Before we do that though, now I don't know if this is going to work or not. It's sometimes sharing sound does not. So let me know if you can't hear this. This is from our sponsor. You hearing that okay? Maybe, maybe not. If you're not, it was the sound of an osprey calling. So there aren't a whole lot of other sounds in the presentation, so we're okay. Just people get a little kick out of that one. So let's see, by way of intro, I wanted to show you and tell you a little bit about myself first before we move into this journey that I took. I started out back in 1980 as an art teacher. That is my formal background. And if you look at the photo on the left, I am the young woman on the right, and I know just about exactly the same. That is a joke that I would typically hear people laughing. It's very hard to do these Zooms and not see your wonderful faces. But anyway, I was an art teacher at a residential school in, coincidentally, Upper Marlboro, Maryland. It was my very first job after college. And I loved being there, but I decided after about a year that I wanted to go back to school for social work. And so I have actually, my job has been as a social worker therapist, working with agencies and individuals focusing on trauma, anxiety, depression, stuff like that. And also have been a birder as well. So I can tell you the story of my spark bird. I'm sure you've heard of those. The first time you decided like, ooh, maybe this birding thing, I think I'm kind of hooked. But I'm not going to go into that right now because I think the real spark bird happened when I began to volunteer for Massachusetts Audubon. And the story of that is that I decided that I was going to, I thought, oh, I'm going to take up my art background again and do some painting of ospreys. Because my husband and I had gone out on the Westport River And we saw our osprey colony there. Just so you know, the Westport River supports and we monitor Massachusetts Audubon about 100 nests on the Westport River, both the east and the west branch. That's a pretty dense colony for about a 3 to 5 mile radius. It's wonderful. And my husband and I once discovered this when we were on a kayaking trip. And then I decided I wanted to start painting ospreys. I thought they were really cool because I could get up close to the platforms and paint the nests. And I was in a store one day in a nearby art gallery type store, and I was telling that to the woman in the store, and she said, "Oh, I know how you can get even more pictures. There is a Audubon group that goes out and monitors nests on the Westport River." I said, "Sign me up." I mean, not only will I get to see these birds that I love, but I could get some photos. And that was the premise. That was why I joined. This is my very first day in May 12th, 2023. And I am on a boat called the Lucky Me, being driven by a guy named Matt, this was his very first year driving a boat. So that was a lot of adventure in itself. And the river can be very shallow in places, and we had some interesting times. So all the photos and the videos and the artwork in this presentation are my own. So here I am looking pretty taking selfies, and that's a little view of the Westport River, which you'll get a lot more of as we move along. You're going to hear about that nest monitoring project, and you're also going to hear about our translocation project, which is really fascinating, where we take about a dozen chicks from the Westport River and translocate them to Springfield, Illinois. So you'll learn and see a little bit about this. And just a caveat, I'm aware of some of the issues on the Chesapeake with ospreys this year, and we can talk about that a little later in the presentation in the Q&A. We've had similar issues up in Westport. So this was, 3 years ago when things were still pretty lovely. And the osprey population that year was booming. So that's fun. What I didn't take into account was that I was going to have to climb some very high ladders. And as a 65-year-old woman, 64 in that picture, I didn't realize how tall they were going to be. And I have a fear of heights. I've always had a little bit of a fear of heights. And so you picture Matt is about 6 feet tall, so you can see how high that ladder is. And it's also sort of perched in some pretty yucky, salt, marshy, muddy water. So I had to remind Matt to hold that ladder for me a couple times. Maybe he didn't share my fear. I don't know. He would start walking away, and I'm like, hold the ladder. So we would every week go out on the Lucky Me in 3-hour shifts, and we would check about 10 nests per trip. And what we're really doing is monitoring the population. So we're checking for eggs, we're checking when the eggs hatch, we're checking for chicks, how many, and we're checking for viability. Are those chicks lasting to fledge? And this is just our population count, but it also has to do with our translocation project, which you'll learn about a little bit more, because we really need to accurately date when all these things happen. So became somewhat,
What's the matter?
oops, became somewhat of a osprey expert doing all this. I guess you would call me a citizen scientist at this point in my life. I learned more about ospreys than I ever thought I would. And there's still so much more to learn. And I just fell more and more in love with them every week. So this is a sort of a view of marshes, a small marshes of see in the early spring, still not really green grass yet. Okay, and you can see the ospreys sort of soaring overhead. This is some salt marsh, which we would have to walk through at times to get to the nests, because sometimes you couldn't bring them home. Any of you have walked across a salt marsh before, you'll know that they are not flat fields. As a matter of fact, there are treacherous little, sinkholes every few yards, and many times, probably every time, someone would fall over or fall in at least once. So we would always wear our boots. This is the view from from inside a nest. I had a misconception that the nest would be very deep, but they're quite shallow. The eggs were absolutely breathtaking, at least to me. They're the size of a little bigger than a chicken egg. And they are mottled that gorgeous reddish brown. And the nests are also many times,
inside an osprey nest.
Oh,
oops, I'm hearing some
I
feedback.
don't know what their eggs looked like.
So if people could mute themselves, that would be great.
What?
See, Lynn might need to mute herself. Thanks, Lynn. And so, thanks, Lynn. That's great. And so these are the eggs. You will see also sometimes feathers, bits of shell. You'll see one time we were there, you can see some corn cobs on the left. An osprey had actually put the corn cob, and they're just decorators. They're interior decorators. I've personally seen tons of different things, bits of bone, fragments, antler, pieces of antler, feathers, plastic, unfortunately, fishing line, unfortunately, again. But they love to find materials and decorate. So pretty quickly after I began this adventure, I realized that what I was learning and seeing, I thought, you know what? This would be really interesting, I think, to some other people, especially birders. And so I took photographs and videos immediately, and I started sketching, painting watercolors, which are throughout my book, all the original watercolors. And I also began keeping a very detailed diary every time we went out on that 3-hour excursion, what we saw, what we did, and who came with us, because there were I got to go out, but there would sometimes be 3 people on a boat. It's a very small boat, and you'll see a sketch of that in a few minutes as well. But there would often be a young person along, including Matt, who was very young. And as Dean would say, our gray hairs or our white haired population, it was thrilling to see so many young people that were going into studying the environment and birding and nature and sharing that excitement as we would see different things unfold along the river. It was remarkable, and it was wonderful. Fun facts about ospreys. I'm not going to do a whole lot of these. I'm not going to read you every single one, because you could look them up, and you could also read my book if you want to, but I thought, let's see some of the more interesting ones. They're found on every continent. They have a very, very large wingspan. They eat mostly fish that dwell on the surface of the water and not fish that we necessarily eat. And I would say on the surface, meaning they only dive down a couple feet, maybe 3.
Ospreys.
And so Sue, you'll need to mute yourself, please, Sue B. They rearrange their fish in midair with their talons. They have closable nostrils. They can live for 15, 20 or more years. And they have lots of different vocalizations, a whole lot of other facts that I'll be telling you about as we move along, but those are some of the more interesting ones. And so I decided, as I told you, that I was going to start painting. And my dream was to paint watercolors and then donate them to nature organizations so they could sell them. Now, this was kind of a pipe dream, I think, because I had actually never in my life sold any of my paintings. And yet I just found them so compelling. All of these photographs from my first time out on the river with my husband have made it into paintings that you can see in my book. And I think I have also some other paintings. So one of the things that happened was one of my friends encouraged me to do a painting for our local watershed. And I said, really? She said, yeah, they have a raffle every year and you can donate it, and people, not a raffle, but an auction, an online auction, and for about 2 weeks. And so I was checking all the time to see if anybody had bid on my painting, and no one had. And so it's kind of like my cousin was calling me saying, I'll bid on it. And my husband was going to bid. I'm like, no, if I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And what ended up happening was that the artwork was the highest bid in that show. And I was stunned and excited beyond belief. It was almost $1,000. And so I thought, you know what? I think maybe I'm onto something here. And so I entered, and there's a reason behind me telling you this, besides the fact that we all have unique gifts that we can, and should give and donate to our local nature organizations like Southern Maryland Audubon, for one, and others. But also because I decided to really use my artwork as a vehicle to helping people understand a little bit more about how imperiled some of our beautiful nature creatures are. And so I entered the Cape Cod Museum of Art. It was a juried show. There were like, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of entries. And for some reason, my artwork here, which is also on the cover of the book, made it to the juried show. And again, these things were happening within months of each other. And I was just over the moon. So here, though, is what I read to all the artists could give a brief statement about the work. And so this is what I was talking with them about. That the Osprey's resurgence, at least here on the south coast of Massachusetts, but also up and down the coast, is a testament to scientists and local conservationists and policymakers working together. In 1940, there were about 1,000 breeding pairs of ospreys from New York to Boston. I'm not sure how many were on the Chesapeake at that time. Maybe Dean or one of your members could probably answer that better than me. But I'm positive that that population plummeted back in this early 60s to sort of mid to late 60s, early 70s. And by 1964, there were only 11 pair in all of Massachusetts. Now, an interesting thing happened when we were trying to repopulate our osprey population. Not only did we build a lot of osprey platforms, but we found that the osprey on the Chesapeake were nesting far enough out, some of them anyway, that they weren't impacted by the pesticides. And so even though, yes, of course, the pesticides were banned and it has helped osprey recover to almost historic numbers, I'm telling you, this audience, that we adopted some eggs from the Chesapeake ospreys. And our ospreys used them to help recover. They raised those chicks as if they were their own because the shells were not as thin because of the DDT. So anyway, I think that's a fun fact for you all. And thank you, Southern Maryland. Thank you, Audubon. And thank you, Chesapeake, because you helped us have lots more ospreys around today. So as a citizen scientist, we would go around, as I told you, we had to track eggs and chicks and pips. And this is a data sheet that we used as we would check each nest. Very exciting day. I'm not sure when about your ospreys hatch, probably a bit earlier than ours do because we're further north, but ours hatch around mid-May. And this was the very first chick that I saw. And as you can see, there are 2 eggs waiting to hatch. So we know it's within 24 hours. To get that close to an osprey chick, I think you all can appreciate the honor of a lifetime of a birder, really, to be able to peer into that nest and take that picture and to smell all the senses, to see it, to smell it, to just look at it. But you have to go up and down very quickly because we don't want to stress the birds. That is very important information that we always get every time we go out, in and out, up and down. So I just took 2 or 3 pictures, counted the eggs and the chicks, and there we go. But here is my favorite video of the presentation for y'all to see. Oops, not yet. I lied. This is, I can't see my regular presentation view, so I'm not sure what's coming when. So here are the chicks, again, recently hatched. Here is a little illustration that I did that osprey chick still has its egg tooth. And now you're going to see oops, what happened to the video? Hold on. Thought I had a video with me. Uh-oh. Well, maybe it's next. Bird abundance in urban neighborhoods. Yeah, that's another slide. I'm so sorry. I'm going to find that video before the end and show that to you. It's a little chick who has recently hatched. I'm going to go back and see if I can find it. No, no. Oh, well, that must have gotten deleted somehow. So sorry. Here we go. Well, Matt, removing trash from nests, land, and waterways. We see a lot of trash along, unfortunately, that the ospreys pick up. Is a lot of times people ask me if the ospreys attack us in any way when we are when we're checking. They don't attack. They're not as aggressive perhaps as like a blue jay might be, or even a hummingbird, but they do swoop. They do swoop awfully close. In my book, you can read about the one incidence that I know of that an osprey actually did attack someone, and that was a pretty rare occurrence. And that's according to our local osprey expert. So here is another example of Alexa, an intern from the University of Maine. So as I told you before, we have lots of young people working with us. One of the things you might notice in this picture is her footwear when she boarded. She does not, excuse me, have those boots on that everyone else was wearing. She got out of the boat and very quickly lost one of her her sandals, her Birkenstock, new Birkenstock sandals, floated by me in the river, and I had to pick it up off the over the side of the boat and dig it up. So that's her kind of, and that's kind of a really good example, though, of what it's like walking in those marshes. It is so muddy and slippery, and the muck is like, oh, it's like wet. I felt like it was like quicksand because it just would suck you right down. Now, obviously, it wasn't quicksand, but that was kind of the consistency. Here is a really sad day on the river. We up until that point had really good luck and seen lots of wonderful chicks and just these beautiful birds soaring overhead, along with all sorts of other birds that you would expect to see on the river. Whimbrels and plovers and terns and herons and just fabulous bird life. But that day, we started to see some chicks that weren't doing so well. And we also, as we turned a sort of a corner in the river, Alexa shouted, "Oh my goodness, what is that? I think that's a dead osprey." And indeed it was. We found it floating the nest. And it was one of our ospreys who we have tagged. Many of our ospreys, we banned them, and we found out that this was one of ours. He was 8 years old, and he had been caught in fishing line. And I'm sure that's a problem everywhere. And he was, as you may or may not know, the male does the majority of the hunting for the female and the chicks during, especially the beginning part of that season. And so we knew immediately it was a male and that it had dove into the water, and we found its talons around a fishing lure that it had mistakenly thought was a fish, and probably kept trying to rise out of the water. They don't have a mechanism in their talons for really releasing their prey. Their talons are designed to hold on to the prey, and probably pretty quickly it got ensnared in the wire, in the line, not wire, but the fishing line, which is as sharp and thin as wire. And it drowned, which was just devastating for all of us. This was, as you can see, a close up of the metal band. And interesting to me was the that the talons were that black is made out of keratin, much like our own fingernails are. But underneath that talon is the sheath, it's like a sheath over the talon. So those talons are very strong and muscular, they're attached to the foot of the osprey. And we had to remove some of them in order to get that fishing lure, which you can see pictured here. Our director, whose name is Gina Pertel, wanted us to bring the fishing lure back to the field house. So that's one of the things that we did. And the other thing to kind of keep in mind was that the week before, when we were monitoring the osprey, there had been two eggs in the nest, and that day, that morning that we were out on the river, the nest was empty. The female was gone. We are not sure whether the eggs were predated, probably, and the family was decimated. And the other thing that I think is worth noting is that these ospreys, our ospreys anyway, are migratory. Yours are as well, I would imagine. The Florida ones aren't, Dean, but ours are up north, and they travel, they're migrating by themselves 2 to 3 thousand miles sometimes to Florida and beyond, to South America, to the Caribbean, to Central America. So this osprey had logged a lot of back and forth miles in his lifetime. So it was really very tragic. Onward to better, or at least more happy times. This was the day that I got to do banding for the first time, which was very exciting. We did that with a man named Dr. Alan Poole. I'm not sure whether any of you have heard of him. If you want the seminal, or actually two seminal books on Osprey, more information that you ever want to know, he is your guy. He is just an incredible ornithologist, and he did his doctoral research on ospreys in our area back when they were first recovering from the DDT that was, outlawed. I was thrilled beyond belief to be able to go out and observe him and help him. And there's a whole chapter in my book around what that was like. He is quite a character, so interesting. Um, and so here he is sitting on his boat, and he had slept on it, I guess, overnight in the middle of a thunderstorm or something. So we had to pick him up on his boat, and then we got ready to band. A close-up view of what the bands look like. Here's Matt recording where, which nest we were banding, and the weight and the height. So just so you know also, when we are banding these ospreys, they are not the cute little pictures of those cute little chicks that I had shown you a few slides back. They are, and you'll see the wingspan compared to some of the other birds that you may know, they are almost adult sized. So we have our bird people, not me, going up into the nest, climbing the ladder, reaching into the nest for the birds who have, razor sharp talons and almost a, 5.5 feet wingspread, razor sharp beak. And we put them into sort of like a swaddle bag. And you can see an example when I do my talks live. I actually have a audience member come and hold that bag, and I show them with a little stuffed animal osprey how it's done. But they tuck them under their arm, they climb back down the ladder, they're upside down as they are carrying them, because they feel a little safer that way, or they don't get, they're not going to fly. The other thing that happens is we check their crops to make sure that they don't have any undigested food in their crop. They have crops like chickens do, because if we're going to band them, if they have food in their crop, they could choke. They could get regurgitated and they could die. So that's the other thing that we check for. So bringing it down, we're putting it in that little green bag, we're weighing it, and then we're tagging it, and then we're putting it back, and then they're going back up again. So I'm the person. So if you see Matt here, I don't have any pictures of me doing this because I was taking the photos, but this is a picture I would stand below with that little swaddle and hold the bird. So I was actually holding almost full-grown ospreys, and I could touch their feathers and feel their feet. And it was one of the most exciting things that I've really ever done. And I think most people feel that way about helping band wild birds. It's wild birds of prey. It's just spectacular. So there's like the video of it you could see. And here again is the size. You can sort of keep holding it there. And you can see the size of the birds in the nest. They get all fluffy like that, like what? But another question that comes up is, well, what do they do when you're banding? You know, are they squirming all over the place? Are they, you know, screeching? They're very quiet. And most of them, some of them might struggle a little bit. You might get a feisty one now and then, but most of them are sort of like that fight, fight or freeze. They're doing the freeze part because that's what they do when predators come. They're still too young to fly. So again, some other pictures that you can see of, I wish I could get this person out of here. You'll see some other pictures. This is Gina and Matt. You can see, have a photo of those big, huge talons and kind of see a little bit more what that might look like. So let's keep going. So now I'm going to talk for just a few minutes more. We're almost, well, we've got another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. So this is Dr. Tifen Ting from the Osprey Recovery Project at the University of Illinois. So I was lucky enough to meet her. She comes and retrieves those 12 Osprey chicks every summer for their relocation or translocation project. And so I was thrilled to ask her a bunch of questions about how that worked, because I really didn't know a whole lot about it. One thing, again, I keep saying one thing you should know. Here's another thing you should know. It's a question that comes up a lot when I do my talks, is that we do not typically take the last chick out of the nest. So there are typically 3 chicks per nest, sometimes 2, but typical average worldwide is 3. And when we take that chick, it's going to get a very lovely diet of twice a day guaranteed fish in Illinois. And the osprey chicks that are left behind benefit from having one less chick to have to share their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I don't know. They're eating constantly cawing. So here are some other things. When she comes by plane, by private Cessna plane, I'll show you. I think that's all voluntary hours that get donated to the project. She takes them on the plane, and you'll see some photos of that. And they spend the rest of their summer on Lake Shelbyville in Illinois in these things called hack boxes. And so because we have aged the chicks to 5 to 6 weeks, and we can't take them any older than 6 weeks because that's when they begin to fledge. And we don't want them flying around before they're fully prepared to really fly and have had practice. So we don't want to lose them. And we also need them to be able to begin eating independently from their parents. Up to this point, the male and female have been just tenderly, wonderfully feeding them these tiny little morsels of fish. At 5.5 weeks, they begin to tear that flesh off the fish on their own. So we need that to be happening too. And in the beginning, this was really an experiment. Would this work? Would we be able to move a dozen chicks to Illinois and then have them eat and survive the summer, learn how to fly, learn how to catch fish? There were some other adult ospreys in the area. So they did maybe a little bit of nature, a little bit of nurture, learn how to fly. But the remarkable thing is, would they be able to migrate 2,000 miles on their own, reach sexual maturity in 2 or 3 years, and then remember how to get back to Lake Shelbyville. And would they even go to Lake Shelbyville, or would they go to Westport where they were hatched? And so it's an interesting question that I talk with about when I speak in front of groups. Few questions. How do they know when the ospreys are ready to be let out of the hack boxes at Lake Shelbyville? Well, Dr. Ting has them count wing flaps. Yes, she has them counting how many times each individual osprey flaps its wings. First week, maybe it's 10 or 20. Second week, maybe it's 30 or 40. When it gets to be about 200, 150, 200, 250 wing flaps per day, they are ready then to start to launch. And they let them out of the hack boxes for the rest of the summer. The interns or her scientists at the program feed them fish twice a day, as I said before. There's a pecking order that happens. And so here's translocation day, and I'm going to save what happened. Did they really find their way back at all for a few more slides? This is another one of the boats that was used to retrieve our ospreys. There's a whole huge plan in place because, again, we don't want to stress those birds. So it's like a 2-page manifesto that they put together. At 6 o'clock, the Lucky Me, which is the boat that I was on, departs from Westport Point, and then we collect the chicks, and then we bring them to the field house. And then finally, we bring them to the end. One of the things I love about this slide is you can see Alexa from previous slides working with Dick Manchester, who is in his 90s and still volunteering. He's a fabulous, he makes fabulous wood carvings of birds as well. So a shout out to Dick, who I absolutely adore. But here you have the generations, a 20-year-old, 21-year-old, working side by side with a 95-year-old on this restoration project. It was just thrilling and exciting. You're never too young or too old to help. Here is one of those boxes that are used for transporting. And I was the transporter. This is my husband's car. They told us to put tarp all the way up the sides because when young ospreys are stressed, they can poop. And their poop is projectile. And you don't want projectile poop all over your car because I don't know whether any of our participants have ever smelled osprey poop inside a vehicle. I will say it is probably one of the grossest smells that I've ever smelled in my life. And people usually laugh about that, but this is the truth. So anyway, I had to transport 3 of them to the field house. This is what our beautiful Westport Islands Pond, which is a pet spa. The ocean is right there. We're right on the shore. And here is another volunteer who is part of our local birding club, our Pascamanset. Shout out to Pascamanset Birding Club. We are loading them on the Cessna. And as you can see, someone got the memo about the plastic lining because all of those seats were lined with plastic. And there's Dr. Ting waving goodbye. And so here we go. Westport Osprey Project hits 2 milestones. This is one of my photographs, proud to say. Our volunteers collected our 60th bird that year. and 2 are said to have returned. That now you have to keep in mind that was only 5 years of doing this, and the ospreys take 2 to 3 years to reach sexual maturity. And birds migrating, sadly, not only is the migration hard, but some parts of South America and other parts of the world do not value ospreys the way that we do, and they sometimes shoot them if they think that they are disturbing their catch, their fish, their farms. So, how did those 2, however, and I will report gladly that there were more than just 2 that have returned to Illinois and started families. How did they figure that out? Well, somehow they made a mental map of Springfield, Illinois, Shelbyville Lake, and birds will return to a nesting site that had plentiful fish. And they certainly ate very well that summer. And probably there's lots of fish in Lake Shelbyville as well. So somehow birds are a lot smarter than we really give them credit for. Every book I read about birds makes me even more fascinated with them. So if you guessed that that's how they did it, good for you. Most people, I might have 1 or 2 in an audience, remember that. So here's another photograph. They're just so gorgeous. The young do have those orange eyes and that speckled appearance. That's how you can tell whether you're looking at an adolescent or an adult. I'm just going to circle back to my social work roots for just 2 more minutes. We've got 2 slides to go, and then we'll open it up to questions. One of the things that I thought was very important was talking with people and encouraging them how to talk about climate change, this climate crisis. And I do have a number of pages in my book dedicated to this piece, but many people still rarely discuss the climate crisis. It's scary, and there are people that don't think it's real. And so one of the things that I started when I started to think about Mother Earth as a therapy patient, as a trauma patient in my office, and what would she say? I recognized that she would kind of say, I need help. I'm feeling burnt out. And so I ask people to ask each other, what do you think is happening to the environment? What are you doing to help? And is there something more we can do together? And you get lots of great tips and ideas. There's a lot of research indicating that people, when they have good role models about reusing, recycling, we have a new program on kitchen food waste recycling in our town, all sorts of great ideas about what you can do, and you can get involved. So I really try to encourage everyone to be more of a citizen scientist and to volunteer. Even just a couple hours a week or month makes a big difference in our organizations. They really appreciate it. So here's a little drawing I did about Mother Earth, and sort of here you are at this talk today, and you're becoming more aware. And if you can model with your family and friends and then join up with a community organization, you feel less alone. Birding is great for your mental health, and you feel connected to Earth and its inhabitants. And so that is my contact information. That is all I have to share. And I want to thank you all for coming tonight and open the floor to any questions that you might have. I'm happy to answer if I can. Remember, I'm only a citizen scientist. I'm not, I'm not a world expert like Dr. Poole.
Thank you, Pamela. What questions do we have from the audience? Have there been any come into chat?
No, we don't have any in chat right now, so we can open it up to the floor.
I have one.
Okay.
Uh, we have seen in the area a huge crash in the number of chicks fledged the last 2 years.
Mhm.
A huge crash. I mean, uh, it's phenomenal. I think I can't recall the exact statistics, but it was just phenomenal the number of ospreys that we just do not have fledging right now. And it seems to be back to the lack of menhaden that
Yep.
they primarily do, because we've had a whole lot of trawlers out there taking them down, and we are trying our best to limit that. Uh, any thoughts on that, Pam?
Well, we just experienced our first crash this year. And I've been reading, I'm a member of a bunch of different Facebook groups. That's where I get my info, but also from our local Audubon. And Allen Pool is not quite sure. I mean, is it because of overfishing? Is it because the waters are warming and there is less fish? Um, I can't help but think there's got to be some connection there. So it's very disturbing and distressing. I know that people were just horrified from reading different posts and stuff. It's just, and to come upon the chicks that are starving is just, it's devastating.
We've
But
had several chats come up there. I see that, Pam.
yeah,
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I was just going to say we have a question kind of following up on that in the chat of what have you found them eating the most?
Well, they survive on it's always those fish. So it could be, we're not tracking that per se. I did see I used to have it in my presentation. There was a fish that was still alive and flopping around in one of the nests one time. That was pretty exciting. But it's a variety. It's not just the Menhaden. I think that is, though, that is a key food source for them. So if if it's being overfished, and, we know Menhaden goes into pet food, it goes into bait for professional commercial fishermen. So there's a great demand for it, and there probably needs to be some legislation that is passed. We again want to conserve this incredible bird.
And we have a couple of questions from folks who missed the reason of why the chicks are transplanted.
And maybe I didn't mention it. Sometimes I think, I think I said it and I didn't. So, in Illinois, have not the osprey population are still listed as endangered or of special concern. So one of the ideas was, let us see if we can help repopulate them as we were helped in Massachusetts by some of those Chesapeake ospreys long ago. So it was part experiment, but also partly can we do this? Is this something we could do? Now it's not what are we going to do? Take all the birds and all the animals that are going, that are endangered now and do this? Like, it's impossible. We need to do more. We need more protective legislation and more citizen scientists clamoring for change.
Judy, are you muted?
I'm not. I don't know if someone
I
is.
see Judy Rosenthal came up there, and I think she was trying to speak for some reason, but we couldn't hear her. Maybe Judy, if you could put it in the chat.
Yeah, I see it. It's did any of the transplanted ospreys return to Massachusetts instead of to Illinois? I don't know the answer to that. It's very hard well, we don't have wireless monitoring on them or anything like that. And so unless an osprey dies, or it's somebody has a really good zoom camera and they're taking photographs of the bands, it's hard it's hard to know. So we are not tracking that. I'm going to guess no, though. I'm going to guess the answer to that question is no, because I think that really what's happens is that the ospreys in Massachusetts only saw the inside of a nest. That's all they saw, and their parents bringing them food. And yet in Lake Shelbyville, they got an aerial view. So they were flying around and they were making notes somewhere in their brains. This is a good place to come back to. So I'm going to guess that they could have gone other places, though. Maybe they didn't go back to Lake Shelbyville either. But I kind of doubt that they would have come all the way back east to Massachusetts.
Pam, when do ospreys when ospreys pair up?
Yeah.
Is it a different mate each season?
That's another really great question, Dean, that some people believe that ospreys mate for life. They mate to a nest site. So if the nest site was successful, you'll see a male come back. So ospreys do return to the same nest site year after year. And if it was successful, the male will come first. He'll kind of scout it out, start, cleaning it up, getting some more branches, and then the female will join him. But if something happens to either one of them, they'll pair up with somebody else. And and they are not always monogamous. There have been affairs in the osprey world, and sometimes it's a lot of work, I think, for them, but they do sometimes pair up with others as well.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you can see that. Go ahead.
See it? Oh, that's a great question. So, and I love these creatures, but the great horned owl is a very big predator of ospreys. And they're huge. I saw one a couple weeks ago on a branch, and I was like, whoa, they are big and strong and powerful. Also, if there's not a baffle on our osprey platform, which is those round those cone-shaped things that you have them on your bird feeders to keep squirrels out. Raccoons can get up there and eat eggs. Crows can sometimes eat the eggs. So there's all sorts of things that can prey on osprey, but I think the number one is the great horned owl. It's certainly the most scary because they hunt at night and the ospreys can't defend themselves because they can't even see them. Got silent killers coming in.
Do
Oh,
we have any other questions for Pam?
oh, I see a beautiful comment though. I want to read this. Climate, we are killing our planet with no regard for life forms, development, stormwater pollution, agriculture, all those things. It is very important to work and talk locally with our neighbors and friends, join the boards, vote to protect our rivers, plant native plants, stop spraying, reduce our lawns. It's absolutely vital. It's the biggest threat that we have. And we are all connected. Not everyone really gets that we are nature. It's not we're protecting nature. It is. But we are also nature. And so it's just bizarre sometimes when you start thinking about it in those terms. So I'm trying to see who gave that. Allison, thank you for that beautiful comment. Absolutely right on.
Somebody that says iPad had a comment asking if great horned owls are in SOMD, Southern Maryland. most assuredly, we have great horned owls in southern Maryland, and they're a ubiquitous species pretty much across the contiguous United States and probably up into southern Alaska as well. They are everywhere, yes. And they are the most vicious bird in the United States.
Although I have to say, Dean, we just read, we have a book group through our local Dartmouth Nature Reserve Trust, which I'm a member of. And so every other month we read a nature book and then we come together as a community and talk about it. So our book for next week, I'll put a little shout out, not for my own book, but for the book What an Owl Knows by Ackerman is her last name. If you're interested in owls at all, it's fascinating. She's a great writer. There's some great photographs and just how owls it sort of it softened me a little toward them, Dean. Like I know I was kind of mad at them for like what they do to ospreys, but they are pretty cool species. So
It's pretty cool. What other questions can we have for Pam? So going once, twice, 3 times. Pam, thank you so much. And is there, let's see, if have we got a way here? There should be a react button there. We can hit that and we can hit the applause. Is there an applause button there like there is in that? Yes, there is. There's an applause button right there. There we go. Fine, fine. Thank you, Pam, for that. We appreciate everything. So very well then, Pam, we just appreciate everything. And I assume this is going to conclude our meeting. Molly, am I forgetting anything?
That's absolutely right. And this will be posted on our website within the next week or so you can tell your friends to tune in and see it as well.
Thank all